This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Matt Addison, Rich Garnett and Michael Plant with me once again. Before we get stuck into the episode, don't forget to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan. You can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link with all of the information is in the podcast episode description box below. On today's show, though, we are going to talk a little bit about Liverpool returning to Premier League action at the weekend against Nottingham Forest. We'll talk a little bit about centre-backs and transfers as well. Even though the summer window feels as though it's just closed, it's not that long until January, and I'm sure all of that talk will ramp up once again. But let's keep it to this week for the time being. Michael, some big decisions for Arne Slot to have made across this international break. In some ways, it kind of felt like the wrong time for Liverpool with the Villa game and the Real Madrid game, but very much back down to earth with that trip to Manchester City. So it's been an important period, I think, before an important period for Liverpool on the pitch for Arne Slot to just think about how he might want to use his Liverpool squad across the next few weeks.
Yeah, he's got a lot to think about across, the course of the first 18 games of the season. But I would say particularly in the last 7 games, he's got quite a lot to think about in between the October and November international breaks, because I think that, well, obviously there were issues still with the performances. I actually do think it contained probably Liverpool's 3 best performances of the season so far. So I do think there's plenty to reflect on positively as well, actually, from the last couple of games. And it's important that he gets things right because, as I mentioned on last week's podcast, this spell now between November and March is the most crucial run of the season, really, because it's the most condensed load of fixtures. There's not going to be an international break for about 5 months. 4 months, maybe. Can't do the maths. So I did get the wrong day of the week before we started recording as well. So it's
I wasn't even mention that.
So it's a really important period of the season. He needs to get this Liverpool side up, firing on all cylinders. Well, for the first time, really, this campaign, because he can't afford for this to keep going on much longer.
Yeah, Forest kicks off a more winnable run of fixtures, I would say, Rich, but it does feel like an important run of games, really, for Liverpool. We've spoken about this a little bit in the past, but it is worth reiterating between now and that Arsenal game. You'd expect Liverpool to win the vast majority of those games. Anything other than that would be a little bit of a concern, really, in terms of their league position at the moment, potentially getting worse if they don't do that. But if they can string together a little bit of a performance, it would suddenly look very different. So it's an important period, isn't it? There's lots of games and lots of opportunities, really, for Liverpool to get into a winning run if they can do that.
Well, they've already lost 5, which is more than Crystal Palace, more than Brighton, more than Bournemouth. So there's a few alarm bells if you look at that in isolation. And because of this poor run of form, nothing can really be taken for granted. But the run of fixtures is certainly more favourable than the run of fixtures that they had before the international break. And you would anticipate Liverpool picking up some wins now to try and get themselves back up near the top of the table. But Nottingham Forest is a slightly different animal now, isn't it? They've got a new manager who knows how to set up a team to defend and frustrate, and that's exactly what he's going to try and do, isn't it? So it's not going to be easy for Liverpool, but they have to start getting wins on the board. One, to get the necessary points that they need to get up to a better position than 8th, and take a little bit of pressure off the manager as well. What concerns me, though, is that I still don't think he really knows what his best side is. And he's got too many players to fit into a starting 11. So he's got a few riddles to solve.
Yeah, let's talk about a few of those decisions. We'll start with the biggest one, I think, in terms of the biggest money was spent in that position in the summer. Alexander Isak and Hugo Ekitike, Michael, is, as we've said just before we started to record this podcast, the one that he's got to get right, really, in terms of that. Obviously, Hugo Ekitike, I think it's fair to say, by some distance, has been the best of the new signings since he's come in. Alexander Isak, though, is going to have to play at some point. So there's been teething problems, I think, in terms of the pecking order of how they put them together, whether they can play together. I think they've only played half an hour or so alongside each other, haven't they? But it's a tricky one to know how to solve that for Arne Slot.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, just a couple of little sound interferences there coming my way. But yeah, definitely it's been a problem that he's going to have to resolve Arne Slot, because they are two very expensive signings. They're two players that he's going to have to get the maximum from, really, across this season. But two players that you think it's very difficult to find a way for them to both play in the team. I did find it intriguing that Ekitike played so well for France and in midweek, playing from that left wing. I think that's really encouraging sign, actually, for Slot. He has mentioned that they both can play in the same 11, albeit saying that he does consider them both really to be number 9s. But I think in the long term, Alexander Isak has got to be his first choice striker, as we were saying before we started recording, because they spent all this money on him. He's the most expensive signing in Premier League history. He has to start as Liverpool's number 9. Now, that does cause some issues. I mean, perhaps that's a long-term thing, that Isak has got to be the main number 9, but in the short term, it's difficult to see, really, or envisage him starting before Ekitike. But I certainly don't think that will be the case in the first couple of weeks. I think Ekitike, when we come back from the international break, will mainly play. But I think as we get in towards more of the Christmas period, I do expect to see Isak more often than not in the starting 11.
Would you say it would be more a case of, obviously Liverpool have got Forest and then PSV in the Champions League pretty much across the course of this next few weeks? They've got 2 games a week. Do you think it's more likely that we see them separately, one for one game, one for another, than we see them together, do you think, at the moment for Liverpool?
I think that's probably quite likely, to be honest with you. I see no reason why you would take Ekitike out of this side. As we said, he's probably been, certainly of the new signings, he's been Liverpool's best performer, and has earned his place in the side. So even if Isak was fully fit and had a pre-season or whatever, the manager would still have a problem as to who he was choosing there. And I guess at the end of the day, if you're a striker, you're judged on your goals, aren't you? And Ekitike is that man. I know he's not got quite as many recently, and he's got as Michael said, the record Premier League signing breathing down his neck now. So he can't afford to let up his own performance levels at all, because even just one sort of average performance could see him go out of the side. Which might not, in other positions have probably been afforded a bit more leeway than he's going to be allowed. But I think you've got to stick faith, or keep faith rather, with Ekitike for now, and then maybe look to bring Isak into matches as a substitute, and maybe he'll perhaps play longer, barring injuries, against PSV than he will against Nottingham Forest. And then Isak has probably got a point to prove, hasn't he? Because he has had fitness issues. He effectively went on strike at the start of the season. So the fitness issues are of his own making. And that's something that he needs to atone for. And the only way he's going to do that is performing well for Liverpool. And obviously to do that, he needs to get on the pitch. But it starts with the training pitch. And if he's getting enough out of him there, I'm sure he's going to be involved, and at some point against Nottingham Forest on Saturday.
Yeah, Arne Slot said something along those lines, didn't he, before the Manchester City game, in terms of, that there is a balance to be struck with Alexander Isak. The only way that Isak is going to get match fitness is by playing matches. But then if he plays him in matches, then A, Ekitike is playing better at the moment, but B, he might get criticised for playing him because he's not at full match sharpness. It's never going to be an ideal situation, is it, when a player misses a summer, and he's obviously just, in fact, Arne Slot said he was ready to, be 100% fit and for people to judge him, and then he gets the injury and maybe not quite back to square one, but it's certainly knocked him a little bit further back in his Liverpool career. It's such a tricky way. I mean, you mentioned it before, Michael, that Ekitike played well for France on the left wing. Is that something you'd like to see at Liverpool? I'm sure that would then have knock-on effects for Cody Gakpo and for Florian Wirtz as well, that we'll talk about. But I mean, that's certainly something that I would consider, maybe not for every game, but it's something that you probably have to try if Ekitike's got to be in the team. And I think the three of us seem to be on the same page that Isak at some point has to be as well. That might be a way forward for Liverpool.
Yeah, and look, while I think it's still a bit of a strange conundrum that we're all trying to work out a little bit. And I still do think all of us question a little bit why they signed two elite, very expensive strikers in the summer. It's good to have those options. And Ekitike, when he was signed, it was on a belief that he could play in multiple positions across the front line. And that was proven in that France game. He really was. I would recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to Google and have a little look at the highlights of that game against Ukraine, because he was absolutely outstanding in that brief cameo. So I think it's a possibility. Can I envisage him starting very often with Ekitike out left ahead of, as you said, Wirtz or Gakpo? I don't think so. Probably not, if I'm honest. I do think that ultimately Ekitike's role in the long term is backup number 9, and that just seems very, very strange, I suppose, for the quality of player he is. And look, I do wonder whether long term Liverpool are going to have a slight problem in their hands with that. Maybe, I think you'd arguably say it's a good problem. And look, it's fantastic to have two elite number 9s like that in terms of squad selection and options, especially if games aren't going well. But at the same time, yeah, I can't envisage him starting many games in the left, Hugo Ekitike, this season.
No, it's certainly an interesting dilemma, and obviously leads us on nicely to talk about Florian Wirtz as well. I'll stick with you, Michael, on this one. Obviously, he played very well against Real Madrid, not quite so well on that position for the Manchester City game as well, but it does feel to me like that left wing might be a way forward in the short term, at least. I'm sure long term, he and Liverpool will want him to be back in that number 10 position, but it feels like maybe that's the short term route to success. If nothing else, it keeps the proper, not proper, maybe that's the wrong word, but the peak midfield three from last season can stay in place.
Traditional. That's the word you're looking for.
Yeah.
I do think that Liverpool have definitely looked better when that three have started. I actually think as well Curtis Jones has played well enough to be in that conversation as well. So that's already 4 into 3 to try and squeeze Wirtz, who hasn't impressed in that number 10 role, into that position as well. Makes it even more difficult. But what I like about Wirtz out wide, and that Real Madrid match was a really good example, but also the Frankfurt game where he started out right and drifted inside. I like that he can just start out wide and come inside and pick up nice positions. I think it makes the team a little bit more fluid. I don't know in terms of pressing whether it has a bit of an impact perhaps, and maybe makes Liverpool a little bit defensively less structured, but I could quite like him drifting inside. And Szoboszlai, the thing is, when you play him in that number 10 role, you know that he's going to do the work backwards as well. So I think defensively it helps in that regard. But listen, I think as you just said, Matt, long term first, I think we'll play as a number 10. But he does seem to be, certainly based on his time in Leverkusen, somewhere in between a winger and a number 10, almost kind of that old school inside forward, which teams don't really play with as much these days. So I think long term he will be a number 10, but perhaps in the short term, that option of drifting it from the wide areas is a really good proposition for Liverpool.
Yeah, left and right is interesting, isn't it? Obviously, with AFCON in mind. What have you made of him, Rich?
Wirtz, I mean, I really like it.
Too harsh.
Yeah, I know. I look like I've got a bit of a crump on today, don't I? No, look, we've got to be realistic about this. I do like him. I think he's a fantastic footballer, absolutely fabulous footballer. But in the early sort of games I saw him, I wasn't. I didn't feel like he was up to the physicality of the Premier League, or hadn't adjusted to it early doors. And I think he has started to adjust to it. I really enjoyed his performance against Real Madrid. I thought it was fabulous against Real Madrid. And that may not have been so much from a creative aspect, but I thought the work rate that he did for the team was absolutely outstanding. And that was more of the sort of level of application that I would want to see from any Liverpool player. And, there's the evidence there that he's quite capable of turning it on when he needs to. But, we're talking about Florian Wirtz maybe playing on the left, but we're also talking about Ekitike playing there. And we're also talking about Cody Gakpo, who's proven to be one of the most trusted lieutenants in the team under both Arne Slot and Jurgen Klopp. So it doesn't fit, does it? You can't play them all there. So you solve one problem, you've got another one. So I'm a bit concerned as to where all this is going and how easy it's going to be to solve these issues. I mean, the only way you can solve them is by winning football matches, and that kind of takes care of itself then, because obviously you don't want to change a winning side, or you only want to change it when you need to rotate if it's the number of matches players are performing in. But I mean, I was talking the other day to our colleague Ian Doyle about this, and he seemed to think that Liverpool have kind of pretty much, wouldn't say given up on the title. That's not what he meant. But the chances of the winning title are diminished with every defeat, and now's the time to come to sort of build this side, or the Arne Slot side of Arne Slot's players in the image that he's envisaged. So if that means changing the shape a little bit or changing the personnel and sticking with it, then so be it. The problem with that is if you've lost 5 matches, you are under pressure to get wins on the board, and experimenting doesn't sound like a very good idea when you just need wins. So it's a bit of a challenge. I've quite liked Wirtz on the left, but what we've gained there in a bit of class, we've lost with Luis Diaz going, and we don't have that same sort of energy and dynamism that he was bringing in that role. But he's gone. Whether that was a mistake or not is another conversation entirely. But I long term, if Wirtz is to be a success at Liverpool, it's surely going to be in that number 10 role. And I guess the question is how long do you delay putting him in it?
I guess that would have been the plan. I mean, we almost certainly know that was the plan in the summer, that he would come in and be that number 10. But I suppose then that sort of leads nicely onto the question that we've kind of all, in a way, tiptoed around of what is that plan? If you've got Ekitike and you've got Isak, you want to play Wirtz there. Dominic Szoboszlai, we know, was very important to Liverpool last season. But if you say that Florian Wirtz has to be a number 10 in the long term, then that kind of adds a little bit of a question mark in terms of that as well. I mean, can you see what the plan was when Liverpool bought these players in the summer, Michael? And what's kind of changed, do you think, since then? Is it just a case of maybe one or two haven't performed in the way that we thought they were? Maybe Szoboszlai has gone up a level compared to what we thought would be the case, even though he was, hugely important. What's changed between what the plan was in the summer and, 2 or 3 months later? We're not quite sure of it, when probably, if you asked me before a ball was kicked, you probably would have said, well, they've got nice depth. They've got, different options and different players. What do you think has changed? Because, clearly the perception, if not the reality, perception at the very least has definitely changed from what we thought in the summer to what we think now.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that is down to the performances, as you say, that when it's not working, you do start questioning the transfer plan. And listen, if Liverpool were winning lots of games at the moment, maybe we wouldn't be having these conversations. But I do think that, and I've been guilty of this even in this podcast, of talking very black and white, that this is the team that he's got to play and this is the starting 11. It's not as black and white as that, obviously. The rotation is going to be a factor. Arne Slot in the summer, when he made the decisions regarding transfer and which players to bring in, wanted greater depth. He wanted more options to call upon. We spoke numerous times last season on how small a squad or small a pool of players he actually relied on last season. And it is good to have those options, that perhaps one game you want Ekitike out left, perhaps one game you want Wirtz, perhaps another you want Gakpo. As I mentioned, rotation as well is a big factor. There's a lot of games this season. We're going to have a World Cup in the summer as well, which the majority of Liverpool players are going to be involved in. So yeah, perhaps we're thinking about it, as I say, too black and white, and it's just good to have these options. The one thing I question in all of this, and I would have questioned this in the summer as well, is don't understand the reason behind signing Isak and Ekitike, because they're both two very similar stylistically, number 9s, and invariably I do think it's going to end up with Isak as the first choice and Ekitike as the backup, albeit he might play out wide a couple of times. So that's the one I would question. I wouldn't question any other transfers, I have to say, but that's the only one. I think that if they wanted to sign 2 strikers in the summer, they should have signed a clear first choice and a backup. And that isn't the case. And that could lead to problems further down the line, I do think.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, in the summer, I was very much up for doing both. And I don't think that is something that you can think about now. I think maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe if that's a problem, maybe you just have to do what City have done with Julian Alvarez and just say, move them on, let them move on, but have the benefit in the short term. I mean, it's far too early even to be thinking about that at the moment, because as we've said plenty of times, at the moment Ekitike is the number one and Isak is the number two in terms of what we've seen on the pitch so far. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting dilemma for Liverpool to work out, and for those players really to work it out between themselves as well. I'm sure there is a way that Isak and Ekitike can play together. It's just a case of whether that works for two or three others as well. But let's move on to a different kind of topic, really. We've mentioned at the start about transfers. We've mentioned plenty of times the deals that Liverpool did in the summer, but that won't be the end of the reshaping of the squad. There's been some interesting comments from Ibrahima Konate this week, Rich, about his contract situation, suggesting that maybe he will announce something one way or another soon. What did you make of those comments, and what do you make of them as well in the context of Ibrahima Konate not having the best of seasons so far?
The main issue is that there isn't really anyone to replace him apart from Joe Gomez, who the manager doesn't appear to fancy. So you're a little stuck in that sense. And obviously he tried to sign an England international defender on transfer deadline day and thought he was getting the player and didn't. So that was probably a bigger blow than we might have realised at the time, because, don't get me wrong, when that transfer window shut, I think Liverpool looked like they'd done pretty remarkable, if slightly surprising business. So, missing out on Mark Gay was disappointing, considering how it was basically a done deal, but apparently wasn't. So would he go back in January for him? I probably can't see that happening, I don't think, especially as he's going to be a free agent in the summer. But Konate, it's difficult, isn't it? Right, because the big link with him is to Real Madrid, which is where one of his previous teammates has just gone and suffered massive criticism as a result of it. And it is a slightly different dynamic. Konate is not a Scouser who grew up, round the corner from the ground or anything like that. We know that international players come in, they play, they move on. That's just the way football is. And if he is leaving or is decide that his time at Liverpool has come to an end, it's probably not a bad idea to announce it earlier. And then advanced planning can, which I'm sure has been done anyway, but advanced planning can set expectations of supporters, basically. And I still hope that they get Mark Gay in. I think he'd be a fantastic addition to Liverpool, but I don't see that being a possibility to the summer, really. I could be wrong, but we spent a lot of money in the summer, so and. You couldn't say that was a total success so far. So I could understand a bit of reluctance on the accountants to go splashing more, especially for a player who could be available for free at the end of the season. So I think Konate can answer some of his critics just by performing better. And then if he leaves at the end of the season, well, best of luck to him.
Can I just say, my mum and dad are accountants, and I never listen to them, so don't let it bother you.
Fair enough.
It does feel, though, doesn't it? Like the centre back position is one where they've got to get at least one. Even if Konate stays, they've probably got to sign somebody next year. It does feel like a major priority for Liverpool. Mark Gay is the obvious one. They might even have to do another one as well. We've seen a very short snippet from Giovanni Leone, as good as he looked against Southampton. I don't think we can make too many judgments on that. And he's 18 years old? I think that's right, isn't it?
I'm one of the few people who've seen him twice, and both times he didn't complete a half.
He told me the story before. He's making it up. He's lying.
It's true. I told you. I saw him in Italy. It was unbelievable.
But I mean, it's such a small sample size, isn't it? It feels like if you had to bet your house on which position will Liverpool sign next, I think a centre-back would be pretty high up on the list, wouldn't it, Michael?
I think you had to guess the next two signings. They could possibly be centre-backs, actually, just the way that it's going. But Rich made a good point there. Liverpool wanted to go into the season with 5 centre-backs because they wanted to bring in Mark Gahey. They're now going into the season, essentially, for the majority of it, with 3 centre-backs. That is a big problem. I think they need to make one addition in January. And I know people will say about the money, but actually the money's there. They were going to spend the money on Mark Gahey. They're in a position to do it. We've spoken to death about the finances and how healthy and strong they are. I think they made, again, I think it's easy to say in hindsight, I think they made a slight mistake with Gahey in not paying that extra $5 million in the summer to just get it done and dusted a little bit early. Look, might be a bit harsh because it was so close to going through on deadline day, and it was just one of those things in the final stage. But I think they need to. I think centre backs are a really interesting position because there could be a position this summer where Konate stays, Gahey comes in, Gomez stays, and you've got this, and Leone comes back relatively quickly from injury, and wow, it's really healthy. I think you've got another scenario where Konate goes, Gahey, who we know has attracted interest from all the top clubs, goes elsewhere. Konate or Leone's not back until middle of the season, and suddenly, wow, centre back's a huge problem that Liverpool have got to deal with. So, yeah, I think that they should make it. I think they should make a signing in January. That's my opinion, and I think that then the summer, well, they deal with that when it comes. But it's a big topic for Liverpool, I think, going into the next 2 transfer windows.
I think whoever they sign has got to be comfortable on the ball as well, because that's been one of the issues I've noticed with Liverpool this season is how much Konate seems to have had the ball at the back. And obviously we don't have Trent Alexander-Arnold there anymore to just lay it off to perform some sort of wizardry. He just seems to have too much of the ball for my liking, and that suits other teams because it slows the game down.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of bits to go into, isn't there? Joe Gomez, you mentioned before. I mean, he has almost left Liverpool in each of the last 2 summers. There's been interest from various clubs in him. I think if an offer had come in and they'd have got somebody else in to be able to replace him, that could have been something that would have happened. And obviously by next summer, we're going to be back in the Virgil van Dijk and Mohamed Salah have only 1 year left on their contract situation again, which I'm really not looking forward to that being a topic of discussion every other week. But I mean, the Van Dijk question is an impossible one to answer, isn't it, Michael? Because whether he signs another new contract, whether he stays, or I mean, at some point they are going to have to find another player to come in and replace Virgil van Dijk. And I mean, right now as we speak, I'm very much of the opinion that he's not had a perfect season, but there's still nobody who gets anywhere near him in terms of the level he can bring to Liverpool. So, yeah, very much would like to put that question off for as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I am loath to talk about Virgil van Dijk's contract situation. I think we all are. But you ask him the next time he stops in the mix zone, what's the crack of this contract, and see his reaction.
So he might struggle with me.
I'll say very quick, Ali, too. Van Dijk, he came through against Brentford, and remember he gave the penalty away, and he said, I asked him about it, he said, did you think it was a penalty? And I thought it was kind of borderline. And I have never felt more intimidated in my life. And just this giant of a man towering over you saying, "Do you think it was a penalty?" And I don't know. Anyway, so in terms of Van Dijk, yeah, I think his performance, the drop in his performance levels, has been hugely exaggerated. I had a look through the numbers and the stats, and he's won more aerial duels than anyone in the league for a start. I think that in those first 4 or 5 games, everyone was praising him for repeatedly bailing Ibrahima Konate out when he was playing badly. And he's had a couple of off games, but maybe that is just the standards that he set, that when they do drop even a little bit, and they have dropped, I don't think anyone would argue with that. But it's just there's such a huge spotlight is shown on it. You've got all the whole Wayne Rooney back and forth debacle, which maybe again shone a bigger spotlight on it. But yeah, I think it's been exaggerated massively how much his standards have dropped, and he still remains a hugely important player for Liverpool. That's for sure.
Yeah, it ties in almost with something you said about Trent a second ago, Rich, in terms of how Liverpool look without him. I think Virgil van Dijk's ability on the ball is passing. We don't see quite as many of those switches from Van Dijk to Salah as maybe what we did at one point a couple of years ago. But I mean, even from that perspective, it will change Liverpool a lot. So yeah, it's very much a priority, I think, for 2026, is not just trying to think about Mark Gahey or maybe having to replace Konate and Gomez. Virgil van Dijk in there as well. It's quite easy, isn't it, as we've all said there, to not just buy or sign one centre-back, but maybe have to go and do 2.
Yeah, and can I just remind everyone that this is the Premier League champions we're talking about here? You know what I mean? The defending Premier League champions who won the league last year at a canter. But there's appears to be more problems that have come with that. And yeah, I don't know I don't have a suggested other centre back, to be honest with you. I'm sure there's one out there, but as I said earlier, I do think it needs to be someone who's comfortable on the ball and happy to play possession based football, and because that's how Liverpool are going to play, even if Slot changes the shape or whatever to try and get some more of these superstars into his side. It's not going to change the actual principle of how Liverpool play football. So we're going to need good quality centre backs who are comfortable on the ball and not only that are of an age where they can be around for the long term, like Virgil van Dijk was. And just to go back to Michael's point earlier, and yeah, I don't really want to talk about Virgil van Dijk's contract either, but yeah, he's still the number one centre back. He's still, for me, as good as anyone in the Premier League. So whether Mohamed Salah gets a new contract, I would perhaps dispute, but Virgil van Dijk, as it stands, you wouldn't want to be without him, would you?
Yes, very much so. All of these problems for the Premier League champions, as you say, at least it gives us something to talk about on these podcasts. But I think we'll leave it there for this week. We'll have some actual football to talk about next week as well, with Liverpool playing Nottingham Forest, PSV, and whoever it is they've got the weekend after that. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure.
West Ham away.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
He's looking at ticket. That's how he knows.
Oh, I've got the fixtures right in front of me. Don't worry.
He's cheating. And yes, as I say, we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you very, very much to you guys for talking to us about all of those various topics. It'll be nice to talk about some football again next week. We'll be back with the next Liverpool.com podcast right here on the Blood Red channel.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.